Greetings. Today is another primarily truck-focused show, and our discussion focuses on the fact that Tesla has announced that the silver semi-truck only goes 300 miles in range. And so our question mark was, is this fraud? Because Elon Musk indicated that there were two versions of the truck, the 500-mile range and a 300-mile range truck. And based on the introductions we've seen, the 300-mile truck was supposed to be the black truck, and the silver truck, or the black prototype, and the silver truck was supposed to be the 500-mile range, which we've come to find out that's not the case. So we kind of review that and some other truck-related news, as well as, again, reviewing our heading into earnings situation with Tesla today. Thanks for joining us once again. This is Greg for Tesla Fan Insight. If this is your first time on our channel, please take time to like and subscribe. If you're a repeat guest, welcome back. We've seen a number of new subscribers in the recent couple of weeks, and we want to thank you all for joining us and welcome you aboard as well. Please also note that we have some folks stealing our show, and if you watch us on YouTube, Tesla Fan Insight at YouTube, that would be appreciated. Also want to reference you to our Facebook page for Tesla Fan Insight, because we have a number of photos, primarily of vehicles at the service facility, that you might find useful, and other information. So we continue to add to our collection there for those of you who want more in-depth information that we can provide perhaps in our regular show. Now, today's show is kind of an interesting one because we've been a fairly truck-focused show in that it's really had an impact on our the number of subscribers we have, etc. And I just wanted to highlight the fact that when we have sort of new information on the truck, it's really nice to take time to look into it, particularly, once a week or once every 2 weeks, we try to have a fairly truck-focused show. Now, one of the issues that's been coming up is the fact that over the last, let's say, 6 months, there's been a lot of, the truck looks great when it takes off, the truck sounds great, or the truck has arrived at a new location. And all of these aren't necessarily bad things. We covered the fact that the truck was moving effectively across the country without any difficulty, and Tesla's the only electric semi that's been successfully able to move from point A to point B without any issues. And I think this portends good things. In particular, we actually did a show called The Bad News of the Tesla Semi in Arkansas. And why this was bad news, as we discussed, is the fact that when a truck is moving long distances, particularly across country, it definitely indicates that there's a viability to a certain range for that vehicle that one needs to be mindful of. And clearly Tesla's enjoying that in this case. There's a segment of sort of study that I wanted to cover in this show, and it focuses on the fact that Tesla has a phenomenon going where, if you'll recall, the initial discussion of a trip by the Tesla truck was a trip that the semi, both silver and black matte finish, there was a trip that was done where the trip went from the Gigafactory to, in essence, the Fremont factory. And during that trip, there was actually a stop that was made that was at the Rockland Supercharger Station near Sacramento, California. So if you look at what the numbers are, that Rockland Supercharger Station is approximately 150, it's under 150 miles from the Gigafactory. And why this is significant is that if you have a truck that goes 500 miles, in theory, there should be no need to stop after only going a short range, in this case, 150 miles. I decided to perhaps change locations because the trees were covering the sunlight, and this gives us a little better shot, even though I was trying to pick up the water behind us as part of this show. So, in essence, what this meant is that The other question is, what did this really mean? I mean, the truck is only going 150 miles. In theory, the 250 mile between Gigafactory and Fremont should be a no-brainer for a 500-mile truck. So this is the first sign that perhaps the silver truck was not able to do the full 500 miles that was articulated. The second issue that popped up was, what if the mountains consumed a lot of power, especially if they were going high speed on that portion of the trip? And then the third question mark was, what is that initial trip that we actually had numbers on? We're making a run that was a 250 mile-ish run, but it was also at peak elevation is 6,500 feet in Truckee, California. So that might have been a variable impacting how many miles the semi could go prior to charge. The second trip that we have a look at, and I really should map this out and put it on our Facebook page so you guys can see what it looks like, is the silver semi by itself did a trip from greater Los Angeles heading to Fremont, but from the Tesla facilities in Los Angeles. So the run is about 350 miles approximately, and the truck actually had to stop in a place called Kettleman City, which is about 220 miles-ish from the Tesla design studios in the greater Los Angeles area. Hawthorne, California is where they're located. So this brought up the other question was, again, this is a 500-mile truck. What is it doing stopping at 225 to make sure a bunch of people could take pictures of it, or were they having a problem or whatever? Well, what if the answer was that if they kept going, they would have run out of juice? And one of the challenges of that trip as well is they had a mountain range to clear, but their max elevation was 2,000 feet. So it's an elevation, it's not 6,000 feet. And so therefore, we started getting a feel that this is a 300-mile truck in reality, not a 500-mile truck. And this was brought to bear by the evidence of how far these trips were going. We were not able to identify for sure what those numbers are until we were told 2 weeks ago by one of the engineers that this is in fact a 300-mile truck. And so this brings up some very interesting points, which is, if you're going to have a 500-mile truck, possibly 600 miles, when you look at the drivetrain and the underside photos that are provided, where exactly are those batteries going to go? So the answer to that is that I've decided on the thumbnail that you'll see on this photo that I have a picture of a Nikola truck with kind of a black vertical object directly behind the driver cabin. And the theory that I have is that there's a possibility that as we move to the longer range truck, i.e. 500 to 600 miles, there's going to be a behind the truck setup that facilitates access to more battery power. There are several possibilities for the extra battery packs needed to go 500 to 600 miles. One, you could put it in the trailer behind the truck. Two, you could put it in a stack behind. But the problem is that if you put it behind, you now start to play around with how your aerodynamics work, because you end up with a gap between the truck itself and the cabin behind, and in that gap you have the possibility of air being captured, and that air slows down the ability or the aerodynamic qualities of the truck, making it more difficult to achieve the range that kind of everybody has in mind. So, and frankly, another option is, what if they decided to use the frunk or trunk in the front of the truck to sort of somehow configure a pack that would fit there, and at least you could add maybe one or two more up in that space, and that would enable you to not add any larger footprint. But as in the current iteration, if you look over the truck, there's kind of nowhere to put those extra batteries unless there's some other structure that allows that to occur. And so we're obviously speculating on these currently. So the next question is this really fraud? And there's an interesting answer that comes up, which is, guess what? If you have certain people called customers and they're currently paying for those items, you have to say that, hey, yes, It's possible that you could call this fraud because we were expecting 500 miles in that silver truck, basically. But there are a number of companies that are putting up the cash necessary to get this truck, and they don't care about it being a 300-mile version that we're looking at, or if it's the 500-mile version. They're willing to pay up and in advance to get a hold of this. Now, so the next issue that pops up here is, as you recall, Elon Musk pointed out that if you look at a truck from a regional distribution point that's 250 miles and less, that actually represents 70% of the deliveries made by semi-trucks. So for that silver truck to be sub 300 miles and what you'd want to run it on a regular basis, in one case you might say, hey, this is bad news, but in reality you have to say, hey, that's a reasonable distance for what most of those regional distributors are willing to and are looking at. And the fact that they're paying up to get a hold of that truck currently means that that mileage range is adequate to service the needs that they have in mind, to the point where they're willing to pay up in advance to get a hold of this truck. Now, the other issue that sort of pops up is that there's an interesting circumstance that could be going on here, which is, hey, Elon Musk has 500-600 miles in range. Hopefully he gets into cabins that allow it to go 1,000 miles eventually. But the factor of the matter is that the semi-truck in its current iteration is having no problems with half-hour breaks to charge up, moving adequately across the country on an efficient basis to and from the Fremont area. And by the way, you'll also notice is that there's an interesting phenomenon that's going on here, which is Elon Musk is certainly talking highly about the truck, but he also indicated that the truck was moving around by itself. And as it was also covered by the last stop that the truck did, there is a problem lurking there, which is they do have a van load of engineers who trail the truck, and those individuals have been making a point of heading in front of the truck to secure multiple supercharger locations that can now be used for a truck that might arrive. So the engineers in that truck, in essence, could identify and fix any issues the truck may be having, even if it was indicated that those individuals were being used solely to reserve the supercharger spaces necessary to make sure the truck could charge without competing with other vehicles that might be occupying those spaces prior to the truck's arrival. So I was sort of enjoying the fact that we could sort of dive a little bit into the numbers associated with the semi today, because I have to admit, frankly, I'm getting sick of this. The Tesla semi was spotted in this or that location. Isn't that great? I actually think it's great that it's moving away from simply how it's operating, within the confines of the Tesla community, and that is either in LA at the facility, in the Fremont area. The truck is housed in Sunnyvale currently. So at any rate, I think it's fascinating. The next thing I'd like to cover is we're at the 15th now. My final note here to make on this is just the fact that it's nice to be able to reach into real data on what the truck has been up to, rather than simply enjoying the nice photos and saying the truck sounds great. That real data is the fact that you can actually track the distance that the truck traveled from Reno, Nevada to the Rockland facility to sort of count up the number of miles across a 6,000 mile pass up. And you can also look at the run from, how long the distance from the Hawthorne facilities to the Kettleman City location where the truck charged up, and really be able to track the miles and see whether or not it's able to handle maybe a 2,000 elevation to that point. What's amazing to me, and I read a number of articles, including the one that was done by the professor from Carnegie Mellon about where the truck was at, and the suggestion was the truck would be incapable of doing certain distances, et cetera. And the reality is that in the trucking industry, there are all these niches. For example, drayage. Drayage meaning that there's a drayage is a reference to the fact that all those containers coming off at the Port of Los Angeles have to get to distances anywhere from a mile to maybe 40 or 50 miles inland to be going to warehouses. And so there's a huge number of uses for this truck, sub 200 miles, like 150 miles. But again, everything up to 250 miles means the Silver as is a good truck. But I do believe that we were actually kind of told, sort of implied, that the Silver truck was a 500-mile truck. And I have to admit, I kept looking at the bottom of the truck and the top of the truck and going, man, 500 miles with only 3 battery packs, and we're looking at 500 miles, and it turns out we were only looking at 300 miles. And the question is, where is the rest of that 500-mile capability going to be placed? And we'll obviously be finding that out in a few months. But it is nice to be able to dive into the data a little bit more deeply and understand kind of what's occurring. Saw a number of questions flying by. I wanted to thank all of you for joining us with your comments. The answer is that Tesla just leased 1 million square feet in a place called Livermore, California. The truck is currently being hand-built in Sunnyvale, but as that facility is being completed, there's now hiring deals out there in Indeed.com and other places to hire about 300 people for the new facility in Livermore. And I think that's where they're going to produce both the Roadster as well as the semi-truck. So we'll see how, it'll be done from there. We're at about 17 minutes here. This is the point of the show where I usually try to, Silent Sam, thanks for the comment. As we know, Elon Musk has stated, and I would agree, that 18650 batteries would not work for the semi-truck because they're just too heavy to allow the amount of freight that he's claiming that they can haul. So it is a 2170 battery that runs in the Model 3 that's being used in the space as well. So I have to admit, I've seen 8 or 10 of you join us on the show today, and I want to thank all of you. Jerry, I saw you out there. I was able to, obviously, Silent Sam, Axis, I saw you as well. I want to thank all of you guys for saying hello and taking time out to join us. And just a reminder, we love to see likes. Any comments you have are also appreciated. And your support by taking time out to watch us on your busy day, especially a football day, is also impressive. We're in the big news period because the earnings that came from the recent Model 3 production, everybody's waiting for this big news to make it happen. Yes, I agree. We're dealing with Model 3 motors as well as batteries for the truck, and I think it's a wise plan to do so. At this point of the show, I have to admit, for those of you who are exclusively wanting to see Tesla stuff, we're there, but I also like to include comments made by professionals in different fields that might be helpful to folks. I ran into a licensed psychotherapist who recommended Jung and his last works being some great way to sort of get your arms around mental health issues, and I wanted to mention that to you. Also remind you, I'm about to do my 20 leg lifts a day that we've discussed. The basic process is that you just sit in a chair and lift one leg 20 times, preferably with a 5-pound weight. The objective is to make sure the knee area is supported by the strength of your quad muscles. The second thing is omega-3, might be a good idea. A half-hour walk wouldn't be a bad thing to consider on a daily basis as well. Also want to recommend that you not eat within 2 hours of going to bed. Preferably it's 4 hours because you'll get complete digestion, but highly recommended. I think we're going to take our leave here. We're kind of in a regional park, and I'll show you some images as we close out. But we're getting sort of the crowd of kids that are on their hangout session, hence all the noise. But wanted to thank you again. This is Greg for Tesla Fan Insight. Tschüss, Max gut, German. Au revoir, French. Ni hao ma, Chinese. Hora hafez, Hebrew. Lehit raot, Farsi. farvel. In Jamaica, we say, "Enough respect, walk good man." This is the beginning of the Potomac River here in the Washington D.C. area. And I kind of wanted to take you guys out here for a little exposure to, you can see the swirling waters here of the upper Potomac as it prepares. Mr. Trump has his golf course on the other side of this river. And, it sort of gives you a flavor for our regional park here. And I thought I'd maybe go into a circle and give you a sense. And based on us listing on the top of the video, you can also kind of look up where we were at for this shoot online. And it might be of interest to see a new location in the greater Washington, D.C. area. Any rate, again, thank you all for joining us, and have a great day. Look forward to our next show in a couple of days, and also would greatly appreciate your liking and subscribing, as well as any commentary would be greatly appreciated. Have a great day, and thanks for now.